Hello everyone and welcome to another Streamlapse. I've got a bit of a long one today. This recording session was, stream was, I think, pretty long. I think upwards of 4 hours, something like that. So, cutting that down ended up being quite long. So, buckle up and I guess enjoy the ride. I guess starting off, we're right back to where we were at the end of the last Streamlapse. I'm just going back to posing my character. One thing you'll notice is his back left leg, or I say back left leg, his left leg is a little messed up. I didn't notice that originally. I think it's his knee joint or somewhere around his hips. Something's sort of failing. I wasn't too concerned about that though when I was originally doing the shot, because that leg is out of camera shot anyway. But now that I'm sort of moving on, I wanted to fix it because I think I'll be, seeing more of the character in a third person perspective. So I want that to be correct. So in this shot, he's sort of throwing his phone away. I think he's just read the message on the phone. He's really angry, so he's picked up his phone like we had storyboarded for the last shot. And this is a continuation of that shot where he's thrown his phone across the room. I want the phone to sort of fly across the room into that kitchen area. And I think the next shot I line it up is the phone flying past the bottle of pills that he's been neglecting. So there's me modeling that here. Just something super simple. Sort of just thought about, what's the shape of a bottle, and then just starting with a cylinder and making a general medicine bottle based on the ones that I've seen. Nothing fancy, just a tube with a screw top on the top. And there's just the phone that I'm entering in shot here, flying past. I'll do a focus pull, so the focus will be directed on the phone, and so the bottle of pills will be out of focus until the phone flies right past it, and then that focus pull will then show like the label of the the label of the bottle, showing that he was supposed to be taking one daily. Or I haven't done my research into exactly how many times a day / per week you need to be taking them. I'll have to do some more research and maybe ask around. But yeah, so there was that shot done. And he's super gracefully grabbing that chair with his two fingers. That's a bit silly. But yeah, here I'm just sort of positioning my character. So he's just throwing his phone, and now he's going to be leaning against this chair. Sort of just, he's mad, and he's, I guess he's a little hot-headed at the moment, and he's losing his balance. So he's just grabbing onto this chair, using it to support himself. He's feeling a little dizzy. So here I am. It's always good idea to completely reset out all of your handles sometimes. You see I just did that with the hand, where it was previously in like a fist. I just decided to zero out all the controls and start from scratch, because it's much easier to start from neutral position than to go back and uncurl all the fingers. So do that as much as you can. It'll also just help with history. I know sometimes if you want to delete your history afterwards as well, that'll help, stopping your, I guess, controls from bugging out, because rigs can oftentimes, they remember previous movements, and then if you've set a keyframe somewhere or you've done something, you can just completely destroy the way that your rig's functioning, and sometimes you'll move your character and, oh, why's my arm down there, So just making sure to zero out all your controls occasionally and deleting that history is good. And here I'm just noting down the fact that I want to do a focus pull. Nothing special, but it's always good if you've got an idea in the moment that you might forget in time, or maybe, if you end up delegating that task, you want someone else to know about it, make sure you've got it written down. So here I'm switching back to the first person perspective.
I want a lot of what my character goes through and experiences to be in the first person. Sort of getting you that sort of POV view of what it's like to go through these strange experiences. And so I do think doing the entire thing in first person might be a little difficult, so as I'm storyboarding, I'm making sure I'm not. Sort of making everything first person. I do want third person shots, just sort of, because all the happenings around is so weird, I don't want it to just be... I want it to be understandable to the viewer as well. So here, what's happening is, so he's sort of getting the first wave of his schizophrenia. He's feeling like he's sinking in quicksand, so he looks down, and then sure enough, his feet are sinking to the floor. So he's freaking out, and he's trying to pull his feet out, using the chair to, push off of, and he's sort of losing his balance here. So I think after this shot, he's pulling his feet out of the ground, and so I think I'm just making sure that everything lines up in shot. I want his hands to be there, because when you've got a first person perspective and you can't see your arms, sometimes it's a little weird. Sometimes it's also weird to see your arms too much, so sort of be careful about how much you use that. I may have to readjust the way I do shots just because of how that looks. You feel like your arms are constantly in front of you and you don't want that. But definitely for this shot, I want there to be that tension of him pushing against things. So I want to see his hands here just pushing off the chair and pushing off the table. But yeah, now that I've checked the shot, everything's in shot. Just making sure the chair doesn't occlude the foot, and then I'm sort of prepared to take my screenshot for the shot. Now that one's on the list. I think I'm just taking a moment to think. It's always good. Just take a breather every now and then. Just sit there, scratch your head, look at your work. Sometimes you might notice something, or you're working so fast you just neglect to do certain things. So sometimes just sitting and thinking about it for a little bit. Just clearing your head. What's happening here? Okay, so now we've gone... So he's pulled his foot out. But obviously he's got that backwards momentum. He suddenly let go of all that tension that was grabbed onto his ankle, and now he's pushed himself backwards, but his other foot is still deeply sunk into the ground, so he can't pull that back to steady himself, so he's just going to tumble onto the ground and the chair is going to come with him. It's a relatively easy transition to this one, pretty much identical to the shot before it, just tilted back a bit. He's sort of a little bit lazy, but I know what's happening in the shot. I don't really need to emote that much with it. One thing you'll notice in the left panel, you'll notice all those green lines. Those are actually just the outlines of all the cameras that are in the scene, because I've got so many shots just around this table. There's this massive ball of cameras right there. So in most of my scenes I have the cameras disabled so I can't see them, and I'm almost just leaving them there out of a curiosity at how much of a spider web it would make. So here he's fallen onto his ass, and he's I think he's just thinking about it. He's just realized at this point that his feet weren't sinking in the ground because there's no quicksand beneath them anymore. It's suddenly disappeared, and he's trying to rationalize it, and then he remembers. idea of like weird sort of creatures, because at least from the stories I've heard of schizophrenia from family and friends, it's from what I've heard, it's usually more creatures and monsters they've experienced as opposed to more realistic things like worms. So I don't want it to be. I might play with that more, make it a little bit more supernatural, or that irrational fear. So here, what I'm doing is, now that I've got these pencil curves, I can now have some geometry which I can extrude that geometry along that curve. So I'll just select those front faces and extrude them to the end, add more segments, and as you can see, it creates that cylinder sort of worm-like shape along the curve. And afterwards you can adjust the curve once again, and the curve, the actual polygons will follow the curve, and so you can continue to adjust it and move it around. And you can animate it, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but I'd like to believe you can animate the curve. Maybe it might be a quick and dirty way to get an animated sort of worm, or like a reeling effect. I'll definitely be trying it in future, so... I'll stop saying I say a lot. But you can see here, I'm just doing it for all of my curves. It is a reasonably tedious process of just moving it, and aligning it, extruding it, moving it, and aligning it, extruding it, moving it, aligning it, extruding it. But it does look pretty cool in the end. It's always good to, obviously, you can see here I didn't duplicate my object before I extruded it. Otherwise you just have to make and resize that cylinder again. You might not get it quite just right. It'll just give you more work if you don't duplicate it. But I've got two more curves left, and then I don't think I'm in mess with the body any more than that. I think I then have the shot lined up. I think I just leave it like that. I might reposition the camera a bit more. We get a bit of focus here. Yeah. So I'm just making sure that now that I'm in the full screen view, I can see everything, and I've got the full arm. But yeah, if you can imagine those lines, those wriggly things to be worms. Again, the following shot, which I'm about to do, he brings his hand up to his face, and suddenly, oh no, the worms are gone. And that's obviously unnatural first, where you'd have worms in your house like that, crawling over your hands, and then for them to magically disappear, something's up. And I think that's at the point. That point there is when he realizes that something's not right. This hand is alright. I'm not a huge fan of the proportions of this hand. You can see it's a little bit sausage-like, a little bit balloon-like. For me, I like my characters to be a little more slender and less cartoonish. But this character's proportions are real goofy almost. So when it comes to my final animation, I definitely want it to be a more gritty, more realistically proportioned character. Something I honestly don't know what I'd reference it to. What kind of design would I go for? What comes to mind? Probably just more of sort of the newer Disney stuff that they're doing, the Disney animation stuff. Been watching Frozen 2 a lot recently. It's an incredible movie. I definitely like the proportions of the characters in that, so I might sort of go for that. They mentioned in the behind the scenes
footage for it, that they don't go for a realistic style, but they go for a believable style, and I like that idea. Sort of, you can take something that's completely animated and something completely fictional, that's not going for photorealism, but still taking on those ideas of realistic lighting and rendering, and water still needs to look like water, even if it's an animation, right? So I might take that on board and try and produce something that's as well rendered as I can possibly do. So that other shot, you may have missed it. It was super quick. I just pointed the camera towards the bottle of medicine, sort of FOV, point of view shot, zooming in on that bottle of medicine. And now what I'm doing is I've duplicated the room. You never want to do this to your original asset. You always want to make a duplicate or copy. And so now I'm just basically, what I've done is I just divided the room in two, and created a bunch of vertices that I can then scale out to make it look like the floor, like the room's separated to two, right? It's cracked right down the center. I realized that, oh yeah, I've got a door right there, so I'm obviously going to have to crack the door. I'm not quite sure what material I'm going to make it out of. I did want the floor to be wood. So if I make the floor wood, I'm going to have to take into account the way that wood cracks and separates from animation. Whether I take that into Houdini and make a wood splinter sim, and again, same for the door as well, because doors are often made out of wood, especially indoors. So I'll have to do wood splinter simulations for that as well. You can see I'm selecting every other vertice, just sort of, it creates that jagged look, and then I can separate them out, and it creates a probably too uniform crack, but this is just supposed to be a storyboard, a visual representation of what I'm trying to produce, so I'm not concerned about it looking too uniform. I'm going to be redoing all these effects in proper detail when I get to it, but the faster I can produce these storyboards, the faster I can iterate upon them, the faster I can implement proper assets into them, and start working on the proper full animation, right? Okay, let's take a breather right now. So I think I'm working on my last shot now. So at this point, like, the camera is sort of, it's out of body, and it's floating around the room, watching this room crack open in a more cinematic way instead of just first person. And so now the camera is panning back towards our character, as the room begins to separate. I think it ends up separating quite a way, as you can see. And I don't know if I want it to be an earthquake or just sort of some peculiar event that goes on within this house. Here I had a bit of trouble, because when I divided up the room, it ended up dividing each and every face into a single piece of geometry. So what I had to do was I had to go and select all of those faces from the room and then, combine them. It missed a spot just there, so I just quickly connected that and then moved the kitchen back into place. I did want, because so obviously the hinge of the door is on the right side, so the door part that's left on the left side, where it cracked off, it shouldn't be attached by anything except for obviously what is that? A latch? Something. The inner part of the door that connects into the wall. But there's nothing really holding the door in place at this point. And so I wanted the door to fall out. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me why every time I rotated the door, it would sort of scale. Or like it would only rotate. Yeah, I don't know. You could see that it was warping and doing strange things. So I decided, even after deleting history and transforms and everything, it
didn't stop warping like that, so I decided I'd come back to it. See, now I'm just repositioning my character. He's sort of, the entire room is just shaken and cracked into two pieces, and he's just kind of steadying himself. May have noticed that I had the couch cleverly just sort of falling into the hole. I think the TV I do as well. Right along the crack. But yeah, and that was the last shot that I did that day. Storyboarding this way is a pretty fast process. At least for all the detail you get out of it, right? You get the full character pose position, you get the room, you get the scale, you can get the motion. You can also animate this stuff as well. So when you're making a previs, you can then go ahead and say I want the couch to be animated falling. I don't have to move much. I can just animate the camera, animate the couch falling, and that's a huge boost in quality in your previs. But yeah, and so at this point I'm relabeling all my scenes, giving them the correct number, and adding in some more descriptive text on what the actions of the scene is. Just sort of a header. I know I can remember it in my head, but I know it's professional practice to just write it all down. And on that note, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna add action to each of these panels and describe it a little bit. But yeah, that rounds out the end of this episode of Streamlapse. Thank you all who made it to the end, and this one was quite a long one, but I appreciate all of you who stuck around, and I appreciate those who enjoy my content. I look forward to seeing you all again. See you around.